questions have been raised around the root cause of racism in South Africa's advertising industry. And that's as the SA Human Rights Commission hears from industry players, experts and companies on what could be done to try and mitigate this. The sector is under the spotlight following offensive adverts by companies including H&M back in 2018 and the Clicks Group in 2020. Let's unpack this for you now. Bring in founder and CEO of BWD Advertising, Bongani Gosa, who's with us now via our video link. Bongani is with us to help us understand the role that agencies and brands have in actually communicating responsible and safe messaging in their adverts. It's great to have you on the program, sir. Thank you so much for making time. As a start, given what we've already heard at these hearings, do you reckon that this kind of intervention, this inquiry, has been a long time coming?
No, totally agree. It's definitely been a long time coming because 28 years into our democracy, we're still talking about it. Just to give you also a bit of background, back in 2016, we always had an issue, like mainly as black-owned, black-run agencies. We always had an issue of clients saying that they can't find black-owned, black-run agencies. What we then did at the time, we set up a website called Black Agencies, which is just a directory of black-owned and black-run agencies. Because at the time, what was happening is that we were not getting work. And then the excuse at the time was that we can't find you guys. So things that are raised now, they're not necessarily new things. They've always been there.
Mm. And what the EFS Mbuyiseni Josie has already said at those hearings, that perhaps we should look at introducing some kind of punitive measures for agencies that appear to be involved in some kind of collusion, which essentially is tantamount to discrimination. Speak to me about the kind of regulations that we can consider to try and mitigate this in a context where already there are questions around whether or not you can force anybody to spend their money on any specific advertising agency.
That's a bit of a tricky one. Remember a few years ago the MAC Charter came out, Marketing, Advertising and Communications Charter. It came out specifically to try and address the issues that are being raised now. It was also amended, I think, a couple of years ago. It talks to different issues relating to BEE, gender empowerment, and also shareholding of different companies. So the regulations are there. The problem that we are seeing is more like the lack of will to transform from the industry. It's not that regulations are not there, they are there. Because what typically happens now is that in terms of regulations, the whole BEE thing is turned into like a box-ticking exercise. So black agencies are usually brought in just to tick boxes. But you will notice that the bulk, a large chunk of the marketing budget keeps going to white-owned multinational agencies. When I say large chunk, I mean over 80% of the budgets. So the regulations are there. It's just the lack of will to transform.
The transformation is just one aspect of the discussion that's been ventilated. The other is considerations, or the lack thereof, to what's known as semiotics, right? The understanding of symbols and messages in adverts. The implicit assumption that I think most people are making is that if more black-owned advertising agents are given work, we're unlikely to see a lot of racist adverts, which isn't necessarily true, especially if those black-owned companies themselves are not sensitive to other forms of discrimination that they may inadvertently be perpetuating through their messaging.
No, I hear what you're saying. So typically in a black-owned agency, black-owned, black-run agency, you would have black senior staffers, like a black creative director, black senior copywriter, black graphics designers. So if let's take the H&M example. Something like that would not necessarily happen in a black-owned, black-run agencies, because if it's not picked up by the copywriter, it will be picked up by the art director. If it's not picked up by the art director, it will be picked up by the creative director. So it's the structure, like there's multiple ways where the issue can be caught. I agree with you that fair, it could escape, but it's difficult for something like that to happen. The challenge in it's just that the issue is slowly changing now. But in the past, in most white-owned agencies, you would have, at the bottom, you would have black people, then at the top, you would have a white senior person that approves the work. That's how we then end up with problematic work, because they approve stuff that they don't understand.
Right.
For example, let's take, there's a campaign now, I think it's been running from last year. It says something like, "Live your monarch." That's their campaign slogan. I mean, I'm a Xhosa-speaking person. That line does not make sense to me. But because it was approved by a white person, someone just explained to them, and then they said, "Oh, okay, this makes sense." They went ahead with it. But if it was in a black agency, something like that wouldn't fly.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I don't think these things are mutually exclusive at all. I think a whole lot more can be said about giving black-owned agencies work and ensuring that all agencies are diverse enough. Because the issue in question here is not only racial discrimination, right? It's just discrimination across the board. And so I imagine because of that, we'd need to take the conversation forward about the kind of diversity that needs to exist within all institutions, if we're having this conversation already.
No, definitely we definitely need diversity. But if I have to be honest, over the past, say, 10 years, the advertising agency has definitely been improving when it comes to seeing black faces. If you go to any big multinational agency, you will definitely see black faces. You will definitely see senior black faces. So transformation is definitely happening. It's just that it's happening at a very slow pace.
All right. I wonder, at the end of these hearings, what you hope will be the tangible outcome. And I'm only asking this because, often we'll spend a lot of time ventilating these issues, almost postulating all these big terms being used. And you kind of walk away without necessarily feeling that there's something to hold on to in the form of a solution, because racism can feel elusive even when we are sure that this is an instance of racism being committed.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think let me answer it this way. For me, if I have to be honest, I'm glad that this conversation has just picked up again, because we've been talking about it for years. But remember, us as black people, when we're talking about transformation, or us as people that are selling services, when we talk about transformation amongst each other, it's not going to help. The people that need to transform are the white people. The people that need to transform are the procurement people in the big corporates, the marketing people that buy our marketing services. Those are the people that need to transform. So after this process is completed, I hope that some of them will be inspired to then transform, to buy more from black agencies, to give black people more responsibilities in those big corporates. But for me, what's important is to keep the conversation going. We have to keep talking about it, I guess, all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps a step in the right direction. Thank you for your insight and for your weighing in. Really do appreciate it. Buyiseni Ndlozi, who was speaking on behalf of the EFF, I think it was on day one of the hearing, saying that the industry itself must be fined about, the figure was 50 billion rand for racism. He says a large chunk of this must go to the SABC for obvious democratic reasons. I wonder whether you agree with that. But for now, Bongani Gosa, thanks for your time. Bongani is the founder and CEO of BWD Advertising.